thanks for having me to give us a quick account of my relationship to Anstey-Keane damplands. And so, as Rod said, I'm from Edith Cowan University, and I'm going to speak specifically about the heritage values of Anstey-Keane damplands, or the Anstey-Keane Bush Forever site. And I'd like to put forward this idea that biodiverse places like Anstey-Keane have multiple layers of heritage values, okay? And hopefully we can leverage these different layers of values in our conservation efforts. So briefly about me, I'm not a botanist or ecologist, but I call myself a plant enthusiast. And I've been in Western Australia since 2008, originally from the northeastern United States, where I was involved in rare plant conservation for a number of years. Since coming to WA, I've been really gobsmacked by the biodiversity, and especially have taken an interest in the cultural significance of Western Australian plants, and particularly the Southwest flora. And that was really initiated early on by reading the works of George Seddon, and Sense of Place was mentioned earlier today. And by cultural, I don't mean the propagation of the plants per se. What I mean is the occurrence of Southwest plants in literature, in art, in explorers' accounts, in settler diaries, in current community memories, right? And other expressions of culture, both of the past and of the present, and of the future as well, as we'll see. So Anstey-Keane is one of the sites I've been looking at closely, and along with other key biodiversity hotspots in the Southwest, including Fitzgerald River and Le Sueur National Parks. And so why Anstey-Keane for me? The first reason really is its botanical diversity, 381 species, and as Rod said, second only in the metropolitan area to Greater Brixton Street. But on a personal level, I feel a sense of urgency for this site as an endangered repository of biodiversity in the metropolitan area. Its location just outside of Armadale provides me a kind of a close access to biodiversity, and in that way it's advantageous to the more regional locations that require much more travel to get out to. And I think importantly, though, that conservation efforts made at Anstey-Keane can serve as examples of best practice in Perth. And its proximity to a rapidly growing urban population in this regard can be an asset rather than a detriment. And on the last note, along with biodiversity comes a host of heritage values, cultural heritage values, and that's what I'd like to refer to now through this concept of botanical heritage. So what is botanical heritage? And I describe it also as plant-based cultural heritage, so plant-based cultural heritage. And I think of it as a living heritage that involves the past, the present, and the future. We tend to think of heritage in past terms, in the past tense, but I prefer to think of inheritance. So a place like Anstey-Keane is one of our inheritances, and it's to that effect that we're charged to take care of it in a variety of ways. And so for me, botanical heritage includes two layers, and the first is the living plants themselves and their ecological and genetic values, and that has been very well documented by FloraBase and other scientific and conservation projects in Western Australia. But the second layer that I want to talk about is the cultural heritage associated with those plants, and that there's a mixing and it becomes a biocultural heritage value. And so in terms of a botanical heritage, there are kind of three and probably more levels to that. You could certainly think of plants as food, ornamentation, medicine, and fiber, the sort of ethnobotanical values of those plants. And it's not that we go into Anstey-Keane and start eating all the Hemidoriaceae, but it's the fact that these plants have been used as foodstuffs, for example. The second level of that is the cultural, the plants as subjects of literary, artistic, and historical interests. So many of these plants have been the muses of artists over the years, not just at Anstey-Keane, but around the Southwest. And the third part I want to emphasize in terms of botanical heritage is plants as important to community memory, to cultural identity, and to personal well-being. So a broader notion of heritage is what I'm looking at. Now, in terms of Anstey-Keane and its 381 species, there are those that really distinguish its botanical character. We can think of the swamp fox banksia, the sand bottlebrush, the woolly dragon, Purdy's donkey orchid, the green kangaroo paw, and Regalia ciliata, from which the proposed name Regalia Reserve comes from. And so this is woolly dragon, Dampiera there, dotted trigger, and Regalia ciliata there. Okay, but we also have the more iconic species occurring in Anstey-Keane. And when I was first there in 2008, there was a profusion of red and green kangaroo paws. I had never seen this species before, so it was an incredible delight to behold. And this is a plant with incredible cultural heritage, depicted here, not at Anstey-Keane, of course, but at Kings Park as a kind of emblem. If we just look at some of the information we can collect about Onyxanthus manglesii, it's quite remarkable. It's in the family Haemadoriaceae, and that family literally comes from two words, hema for blood and dorin for gift. So metaphorically, it's a gift of blood. Right, very interesting, and it has numerous common and Noongar names, as you see there. Noongar names including Kurich and Kurumbrung. Noongar people consume the tender, starchy rhizomes before the emergence of the flower, so it has an incredible Aboriginal heritage value. It was selected as a state floral emblem in 1960 in a proclamation made by then Premier David Brand. Okay, and these are just a few tidbits related to its cultural heritage value. And what is WA wildflower tourism without the red and green kangaroo paw? So these are posters from the 1950s celebrating the sort of bucolic wonder of Western Australia, with the kangaroo paw very much a central character there. Let's just have a quick second look at another prominent species. It's one that you'll know about, and one that's also at Anstey-Keane, and this is Xantheria. Xantheria, the genus actually comes from the words xanthos for yellow and rio for flow, and so that's referring to the gum exuded from this plant. If you've ever looked closely, you'll see these kind of cankers, kind of a dark red cankers. That's the gum resin from the bark. This species has strong Noongar heritage value. For example, the long, thin fronds of the balga called mandari were used as bedding and to cover the roof of a dwelling, and the balga resin can be used as a tanning agent. In fact, the colonists picked up on this indigenous knowledge and prepared varnish from it. So here is the broken balga trunk at Anstey-Keane in 2008. So just concluding here, I'll wrap up by saying that biodiversity is closely connected to cultural heritage, and that the more we can think of these two in unison, the better off we'll be. We can think of both conserving and creating heritage value. In conserving the plants, as we've been talking about this morning, we conserve simultaneously their cultural heritage values for future generations. And I also want to suggest that we need to create heritage values. And this means, for example, bringing artists and poets, novelists, documentary filmmakers, performers, perhaps even chefs to places like Anstey-Keane to create new cultural expressions of the biodiversity. And as an example, Rod has a copy of the book, my book with Ellen Hickman, illustrated by Ellen Hickman, called Two with Nature, and that includes poetry written about Anstey-Keane. So that's an example of creating heritage value as we're conserving it. So in this respect, I feel that the arts and sciences can contribute to conservation in these different ways. And on a concluding thought, I'll be beginning a project called Floricultures next year to document and archive these kinds of heritage signifiers, this information that shows these are culturally important plants, as an online archive, eventually becoming an app that people new to the region might be able to use to build their appreciation for our indigenous flora. So thank you very much for your attention.